Welcome to the Dwayne Kerrigan podcast, and I'm your host, Dwayne Kerrigan. With 35 years in business and close to 30 ventures across 12 industries, I've seen a lot. Amid the celebrity allure of entrepreneurship, many exceptional entrepreneurs remain shadowed. Here, I team up with these hidden talents to unveil their challenges and successes. Dive in with me to unearth entrepreneurial gems, learn from our experiences, and get educated. I have today with us Vaneli Martinov. And she is the Executive Vice President of Operations for what is called the Winter Equestrian Festival down here in Wellington, Florida. And we had a chance to meet. We've been coming down here for years. My wife is obviously a rider. And, well, that's not obvious, but it is to me. But so we've been coming down here for years, and it's always amazed me. I always get amazed by well-run operations. And then this past year, we had an opportunity to meet you and I through a friend of ours. Thank you, Tegan and Brett. And so, it was just like, to watch you, in full operations mode is really unbelievable. I'm an operations guy. It's what we do. We've done it for years. 35 businesses, 14 different industries now I think we're at, or 36 businesses. I just lost count. But, and my wife's an operator. Like, it's kind of what we do. And so I really get excited when I meet people who are phenomenal at operations. And so welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I think like this is the perfect time of year to have a conversation like this, because people start off in January with like budgets and hopes and desires, and this is where we're going to be at this point in time of the year for quarter one, quarter two, whatever it is. And then between the hopes and dreams of, setting budgets whenever they do that in, if it's October or November, December, January, or sometimes March, they actually get around to it or don't do it at all. But at some point in time throughout the year, they go, we aren't where we wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times the result of that is a gap in operations. Mm-hmm. So I think this is really, really, really timely. And just so guys, just to give you a little bit of understanding, I'm gonna probably bastardize this a little bit, but like Winter Equestrian Festival is a facility that spans 500 acres.
So the festival itself is kind of a circuit that is run at Wellington International. So the venue itself, Wellington International.
Right, is 500 acres. And then you, I believe, organize like 300 events. They say a year, but that really happens in about 16 weeks.
More or less, yeah.
More or less. And then I just want to give people kind of like an overview of like, holy shit, like 300 events in 16 weeks are pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, oh man, we're probably even hundreds and more of that. It's all relative to kind of, you have the daily operation of a horse show with numerous venues running all at one time. And then you have private events hosted within. So yeah, we, over a year, we've reached upwards of 500 or so. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. It's insane. You cover hospitality, security, facilities, retail, more than that, I think. Sure, yeah. It's the whole kit and caboodle. I can just say, guys, like what this woman does is just, it's really impressive. It's really unbelievable. And I think you epitomize this podcast. It's like, this podcast is not about famous people doing, cool shit with big teams and massive budgets. Right. It's everyday people kind of making it happen every single day. And, the goal here for us is to have conversation so that the listener can take away something to go back to their operations team, like specifically in this conversation, take something away for their personal life, like just anything that moves the ball a little bit forward. A small distinction. Many people don't have mentors or significant mentors or coaches. And so this is just a means for us to kind of have conversation and then glean what they need from it. So thank you for being here.
Dwayne, thank you. First of all, you've set me up on a high pedestal there. I'm humbled, honestly. I'm honored to be here, and I hope I can provide any insight of what I do, and if it could be helpful to anyone. I oddly don't, when you hear it on the other side of what we take on or how much we operate or kind of what's in the scope of my job, it does kind of make you think a minute, because you're just so engulfed in what you do every day that I think at times you forget the magnitude of what we produce and what this horse show is, because the horse show is the world's largest and longest, in the world. So we're dealing with, hundreds of thousands of people who come through our doors and thousands of riders like your wife who moved to Wellington. And, I've been doing it for so long, it kind of becomes second nature, but it is pretty remarkable when you stop and reflect on what as a team gets produced here from a seasonal perspective, because most people are used to kind of permanent venues and kind of the stability of going on and on and on, but you kind of have to build it up and take it down and start all over again. So,
well, and that's the crazy part is like you guys build up and take down at the end of every season, and you're usually building up during a time where there's hurricanes coming through, and so like it's like I can't even imagine it's an operational nightmare. And just to your point earlier, where it's like, well, I've built you up. I don't know if I really have. I mean, you've done other projects where you project managed a $200 million facility on 1,600 acres. In charge of building stadiums, lodging, restaurants, retail, golf course. Your experience is unbelievable. And so here's what I would say. Like, you're a young woman. You have a husband and a young boy. I believe
a little over
right?
a year now.
A little over a year now. And so, what's your secret? What's the secret to your success, or what would be some of the things that, if you reflect on it?
Wow. It's a juggle for sure. And I think that you're never fully, I've found this, since getting married and having the baby and the job. In my early career, you're probably more kind of pivoted to being 100% job focused, right? And that's kind of that career growth to kind of get you to position you hope to aspire to kind of gain growth in your career. And then, you kind of get into marriage and stuff, and you're starting to prioritize your family. And now you realize when you have the blessing of a child, that is your life, your priority. But at the same time, as is everything else that you're doing. So I can't say that I'm ever fully 100% achieving perfection at any one of them right now. You're just trying to balance it all, and you're sometimes winning more in one realm of it than others. And the secret, that's kind of coming back to the question you're asking me. I think it's just taking it day by day and just seeing how you can wake up and be. I really strive to wake up with a positive attitude and be grateful every single morning for everything that we have in front of us. I'm blessed for my family. We have to be blessed for our health. And I love working with the people around me. I love my job. And I know that is probably genuinely cheesy to say to many people. They're like, oh my God, please. I can't say that I'm not stressed or tired or, it's not overwhelming at times, but I really do enjoy what I do. And, let's be honest, Dwayne, I think you have to be a little bit crazy to love to live in that fight or flight, or be so used to living in that fight or flight state of chaos, because that's what hospitality or these project developments or this management, I'm very much, since out of college, I have found myself, people always lean into me for almost like startups or projects or things of that nature. And that's kind of where I sense to thrive, to kind of complete or achieve something, or kind of I don't know if I would do very well in kind of a normal day. Yeah. And I say that I want it, but also I've been in this business 16 years and I've never had the same day twice. So I don't know, you don't know if the grass is greener. Trust me, I've thought about it at times. I'm like, man, I'd love to just slow down and kind of do something every day, but I think that you just have to have a certain personality, and maybe some of the success is, maybe that is what I thrive or do well at, if you're asking, maybe that's kind of where it's gotten me. I don't know.
Well, so, I mean, there's a couple of things that I feel like right at the beginning there, you broke out three pieces that, I kind of took attention to, which was one was your early stage of your life, where you're focused on your career, and then you get into marriage, and then you get into family with kids. So but as you were just talking there, as it relates to the early stage of your life, what was like, because you had just kind of framed, hey, the steady life, a job that's steady and consistent and predictable and all that stuff. And then you get into operations where it's chaos, unstructured, variety. You said, 16 years, I've never lived the same day twice. And so were you like that as a kid? Like, did you need a ton of variety, or did you?
I've had a unique upbringing. I can't say it's kind of the typical American family. My family's I'm first generation American, so we came over, initially in my childhood, there was some moving around. And once we got settled, there was just unique things my parents even did. Like, I went to a Japanese immersion program school, and I studied Japanese, half my day in Japanese. Like, those are not kind of the usual early life school programs. And then I guess when I went to college, I can't say, I'll be forward. Like, I was not your easy straight A student, right? Like, I'm not your textbook, you get an A on that accounting test or whatever. You always had to kind of work at the school element, but I was always kind of hustling to still kind of be good at whatever I was doing. So like in college, even though I wasn't the straight A, I was a business major. And even though I wasn't the straight A business major, I had A's and B's. I was like, well, what can I do more to kind of get involved, to learn from physically being involved? And kind of my focus was hospitality. And then they kind of made me start up a program for the hospitality students. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do this. And let's start to kind of take on activations in school. So I kind of create chaos for myself, like outside of the steady work of, right? Like what I'm mentioning, like the workforce, I'm kind of reflecting and on what your question. And I guess I kind of went there and I was like, well, what if we did this? And I kind of created this own programming in the college school, and we kind of went and did mentorships or, amongst like hotels or clubs and things with other students. And that still, I believe, is a program that continues today. But yeah, I don't know that I'm answering the question because I'm just kind of reflecting on it, but I think I'm naturally creating it.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because as you're talking about it, I'm like, as you talked about your career and a little bit, and we'll get into it more, but it's like, when someone says like not every day is the same, it's always different. I've never lived the same day twice. You kind of in your mind start to picture like an adrenaline junkie or something and then they've converted this, like past, experiences into, a career which feeds the same thing that they were getting as a kid, but it's not like it was. And so I'm interested from the perspective for, there's a few things that kind of come to my mind here for the listener and for myself even, like just, I've got, young people who work in our business. So, there's a responsibility to either coach directly, depending on the size of your organization, or coach your people to coach effectively. But, we all hire young people. A lot of us have kids. And it's, as you kind of said, like that early career, like what did the focus look like? How intense was it? And what were some of the roadblocks that you occurred early in your career for you to prepare yourself to be able to handle what you have in front of you now as a mom? Because like, to me, everything is like a building block. And, so often we forget and think like, well, you should know this because I know this, you should know this. And we project that onto our people. And it's a dangerous game that we can play. And we probably, I know I've made the mistake, but I've, lost people because of not having the right perspective or empathy or wherever. So I'm just curious kind of how that rolled out for you as you were younger, you come out of school, like what's it look like?
I don't want to diminish, schooling or university or the education element. I certainly don't. I'm grateful.
That's okay. We're big on that in this podcast.
I don't want to diminish whether you're for it or against it, but I will be for it. What I learned coming out of college was more, when I got, so my first internship, right, was this golf club in New York City. It was the most expensive golf club in the whole world. And they didn't even have an intern. But I said, I want to be the intern there. And I met their GM and I just kept fighting for it. And they were like, this girl, won't leave us alone to be the intern here, because my other friends were going out to the Hamptons at other clubs that held internship programs, but they were just they hadn't even built the club yet. They were just starting with some cabins and things like that. And they're like, man, she's relentless. And they're like, all right, fine. So they took me on as an intern at, I was still in college, junior year. And I think, okay, step one, kind of answering your question, go for it, fight for what you wanted. And at the time, that's what I wanted. And I was, probably pretty forward and just kind of saying I will try it. And I had no idea. I never worked in a golf club or any of that. And you just learn as you go, and that particular year, again, I was an intern, dropping off newspaper, doing anything they needed that year. And they were like, you know what? We appreciate your drive, your willingness to learn, your ability to, I would do anything. There's nothing beneath me. And that still stands today. I think a lot of my staff respect me for that, because there's nothing too low for me, if that makes sense. I'll do anything that's asked of me. And so they hired me out of college. They said, you graduate and you'll be the director of member services. This is the first year out of college at the most expensive golf club in the world. And again, I'm a pretty humble person, so it's weird when it's coming out of my mouth. It's kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool. You went for it. But, I ran, the initiation fee was $1 million. You're with the, 1% of America running their member services, and you're fresh out of college. And even them on their side, I think, started to notice this young woman's kind of doing her thing. And long story short, that's what eventually drew someone from the club to kind of pivot. And, I was looking to transfer to Florida, and that's where I've been for the 16 years since. I got welcomed down into Florida, into Wellington, became an intern there. And I had that same thing. Hey, I'm here. What do you need me to do? And I think a lot of it, and a lot of what I've done, when you're mentioning the World Equestrian Games or putting on a horse show in Central Park or building a project, I haven't done many of it. I just am willing to read about it, learn about it, work alongside the people who know about it, and just kind of build and learn and grow. And over time, you gain that expertise, and then you can become more specialized in kind of getting people. But I think the biggest takeaway, I guess what I would say, is what's gotten me here is the fact that I pretty much say yes to anything, even if I am terrified on the inside. They tend to call me the swan. I'm graceful on the outside, but I'm fluttering and, on the top of the water, and I'm kicking underneath. the duck. But I just kind of you know what? I think I can do it. And I just have that. And again, I don't always think that I can do it, but I'm just, to myself, I'm like, you know what? Let's figure it out. So that's I'd say from college, kind of like I was mentioning, I was just kind of, let's get into this, to coming out of it to where I'm at today. And I'm still challenged every day. We have new stakeholders or owners or different leadership styles or different expectations they have of me. And I don't fully have it. I will not, you don't ever fully have it figured out. If you think that you have it fully figured out, I think...
Yeah, the universe is going to show up and give you a kick in the ass.
Exactly. I think if you live a little with that in mind, you should always continue to learn, grow, and...
There were three pieces that you had kind of mentioned that I just would love to circle back on. You said drive, willingness to learn, nothing too low. There's nothing too low for me to do. Yeah. When starting out in your career, and so I think that this relates on a few levels, both with people who are listening that are young, people in their business that are young, and what to look for when, and we'll probably get into this too about hiring, because you're hiring, like you guys hire like hundreds and hundreds of people every year and every season. But how much of that drive and then willingness to learn and the hustle was critical in the early days to your career? And then for the listener, I'll say, like, and if you're starting or, within the first, what I would say 3 to 5 years of your business, because it takes a long time, how critical is that hustle?
Again, I can't echo the importance of that enough. I mean, listen, I don't know any successful, like yourself, CEO, or people that have not said this was really easy. I was laying back and sipping margaritas and taking time off. I mean, you have to put the time in. You have to work for it and yearn for it. And the people, and it's attitude too. I think you want to show up with a great attitude, and it could be hard, but again, I think if you're asking me for the younger generation, as a leader sitting on the other side and seeing who are most successful for my organization, it's the people who are just coming in and saying, what can I do? What can I learn? Am I doing this right? And again, if they didn't do it right the first time, you guide them, you mentor them. And I learned that from people above me too. They kind of said, I'd prefer it this way or that way. And you just keep learning. But yes, I think the hustle, the drive, I don't always know the answer of what's motivating you to have that. I just think that if you want to grow it or become whoever you're aspiring to be, or whether you're scaling a business, I think you got to have that in your genes,
in your DNA. Well, let me ask you this though: is that innate and in your DNA based on your experience, or would you say it is a skill or a muscle that you could build? And then, so that would be my first question. Then I have a follow-up question based on your answer.
I think really it can be a skill and a muscle that can be learned with, I'm going to answer your question, right, Brain? I mean, I think there has to be a little natural personality in there to kind of have that. But can you, if you didn't, let's just say you didn't have it so innately, if you sought to kind of develop that, I think you could learn a lot of those skill sets, right, to kind of get you there.
Yeah. Yeah, because I imagine when you go start your first job out of college and your internship while you're in college, right, is working with some of the wealthiest people in the world. Mm-hmm. How to deal with them. You don't learn. You're not learning that from if you grew up in a middle class. I don't know what your past is.
Yeah, no,
if you grew up in a middle class family, you don't know how to address. So you've got to learn that skill.
100%.
And so, for you then, and from your experience and the advice that you would give, is what are the tactics? What are the strategies that you kind of use in the early days? Because, you can pick up any book and go, oh, you got to be enthusiastic. You got to be hardworking. You got to do, but what is, for you, what did that mean? And how did you specifically kind of execute it early days?
It is important wherever, to latch on to some people around you, whether they're colleagues or mentors or someone that you're feeding kind of answers. I guess you have the ability to ask the questions and get the answers you need. It's
a tough question because it makes you really kind of, it makes you go back in time to think about what were the tactics or the strategies that you executed that you go into this place, you're dealing with the wealthiest people in the world. Mm-hmm. My hallucination it's only a hallucination. We've never talked about this before. I didn't even know you did this. Yeah. So it's a 40-hour work week's not cutting it. Right. So what specifically did you, uses tools to develop this skill set and to be able to create hustle, willingness?
I mean, I think relationship development, I mean, I recall again, maybe I just naturally, again, my role at the time as an intern and then into the member services, my goal was to create guest satisfaction, customer satisfaction, no different kind of what we try to achieve today. So it's a lot of listening to their needs, predicting their needs, so you're ahead of it, and then you're basically one step ahead of them. So then, Dwayne, you like your coffee this way, and then, by the next day I already have that coffee ready for you. You don't have to ask me twice. And, you're just doing different things naturally to, whether you're doing that for your guests and your customers, whether you're doing it for your boss, or you're working with your colleagues and you're figuring out ways. So maybe it's the psychologies of learning the people around you and how to interact to best take care of their need, if that makes sense.
No, it's 100% makes sense. Like, I mean, that distinction of predicting what the customer needs is, so many people, I think, in this world run off of reaction, waiting for a problem to happen rather than predicting what they need in the future.
Yeah. Proactiveness, I could echo like, I say it to the team, let's be proactive than reactive. Yes, you would love to live that every day in every business, right? Not just hospitality. You whatever industry you're in, you'd like to be as best prepared as you can for the what ifs, right? Risk mitigation and all of that. But I think you have to know and realize, well, how are you going to react, knowing that very often these industries, or a lot of what we deal with, are reactive, right? Like the joke is that I'm, the firewoman or the crisis customer center, call center of the organization, right? Everyone comes to me for everything and just says, well, what do I do? Whether it's a customer or a situation or whatever it is. And you just, you take it in and you kind of figure out how to deal with whatever that is. But
I feel like that's a piece of like, that's the responsibility of an executive vice president. Right. Like I think we're probably very similar in that is like, my day is virtually consumed with solving other people's problems when they get stuck. Like there's a certain percentage of 80, 90, 95, 98% of problems they're solving, you don't even see them. But the biggest problems that they struggle to solve or need some clarity or have some uncertainty around, then it's like, okay, we're going to Vaneli. And it's like, wow, we got, but in the early stages, because I try to want to build, I see there's like a build up here to going like, hey, like that predictability is unbelievable. Like, so if we're talking about, the early stage of that career part that you had talked about originally, which was, the early stage of your career and then managing yourself in your career while you're married and then managing, and again, now once you have a 1+ year old, and like, it's really, I'm really interested in what tidbits you have about how you built yourself so that listeners who are listening can hear that, but also people who own businesses so they can coach the younger generation. I always risk at saying to myself like, oh yeah, kids nowadays, they all like,
I get
every
it.
old person has been saying that, and so I try to avoid a lot of that rather than, because then you fall into judgment versus understanding.
You want to teach, and grow. And, I think because I'm in such a unique industry, like I literally could tell you, like, and I've had such a unique path to get where I'm at. Like a lot of it is just so project oriented. Like, I was at the golf course and then, I was down here kind of interning, and then I went and built a venue, and then I did a horse show over here and a horse show over there. So there was just so many different. So I'm just trying to kind of figure out in my life how I can resonate with others. I think that whole time you're just developing skills and you're learning, and you're developing skills and you're learning, and yeah, I read the book, I read self-help books, or, even in the down times, you constantly keep learning. Like in the down times, I got my real estate license. In my downtime, I got a project during COVID, I got my project management degree. And I can't say, maybe all those things in a subconscious way are constantly growing you with different skills that you don't even realize you need, because I can't sit, I know you're trying to pull it out. I mean, like, what was the one thing that you learned, or the book that you read, or whatever it is? And I think it's like, I'm just trying to pull from all the different experiences that you're just picking and learning different skills. So I guess in your early life, maybe you're building that foundation, and the skill set is more of kind of the training, the hard work, right? So, again, to get to where you're at as executive, I was the person who was putting up the banners in the arena 16 years ago, right? So, I was muscling the food like the other servers. I've done some of the, I've helped the guys with the trash pickup or the landscape. It's almost like whatever business you're in, you should learn it from your whole, live a day in the shoes of all the people within the business, so you can eventually know what all those different aspects of said organization, come to, right? Like, would you relate to that? Would you say that you would only know how to problem solve kind of some of your, employees' needs or fixes by just kind of realizing what they deal with on a day-to-day basis? Would that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's 100%. I think it's amazing. Like, I'm seeing this and I'm going like, this is very... I'm
painting some picture, but I don't know what picture I'm painting, right?
Well, and that's the beautiful part of a podcast, is because we're going to have a long-form conversation, but the audience right now is putting that together, and I'm putting it together because it's like, the very first part of at least your career here too, and what you're learning was, hey, I got to predict what the customer wants. I've got to be one step ahead of them, not one step behind them trying to mop up the crap. And then I've got to go over and above. So I figure out, like, how do I go over and above all the time? And how many hours, just out of curiosity, how many hours in early days when you started on that, let's say the golf course, how many hours a week are you working?
Listen, that's the craziness. I mean, I think most weeks are 80, 70. I mean, I've pulled 100-hour weeks plenty of times in my life. You still do. We still work 6 days a week. So, but yeah, the commitment and drive to the hours, I think that is a foundation genuinely. Like, I can't say it's always great to have that workaholism, if you will. I don't know if that's a little bit of what's developed in our culture, that I kind of wish there was a bigger balance. And now I'm reflecting on that as I near my 40s with my family. I'm like, man, I really worked, that early part of my life. Everyone's like, oh, I went to the clubs and I lived it up and I did this. And I was like, yeah, I worked, but it's the truth. Like, that the story I'm telling is just the story. I hope, it might resonate with everyone. I'm just not sugarcoating it. Like, I had to work to get to the seat I'm at today.
And I think you can have anything you want, but you can't have everything you want.
You said it perfectly.
People have to, I actually had a note written here, compare. It's like, if you were to, compare is probably the wrong word, but if you were to kind of look back at your life and go, would I have chosen a different path? Like, would I've wanted to go to the clubs, where all my friends were, versus, where are they today? Where are you today? And I'm not talking about gauging happiness, but everybody has their own outcome. Right. But the reality is the people who are listening to this podcast are not people who typically are going to want to sit on the couch and
I got it. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Right? These are people who are, leaders in business, they're entrepreneurs, they're business owners, they're looking to potentially live their dream and buy a business. Like, so, I mean, we're kind of speaking, we're preaching to the converted, if you will. And so.
But you're passionate, like, right, you got to be passionate about it. Like that's it. Like if you're listening to this podcast, you're like, something's driving you to say, I like what Dwayne and his, and the people on his show are saying, because, I would imagine that most of your other guests are not like, man, this just got like handed to me super easy and that's the end. Thanks. Have a good day. Right? Like there's a lot.
Yeah, well, most of those people, that's like sometimes second, third generation wealth, then they get it and then they lose it or they don't do anything with it. So
fair, which would, could be nice. I mean, and again, like we had stability and foundation in our family, and people have asked me too, like, why, like, was it something in your childhood, listen, I probably do need to see like a psychiatrist or something. Why this hard work, right? Like why this effort? Kind of like you're saying, like, oh my gosh, Vaneli, you're always working, always this. And it's like, I don't really have that answer either. It's not like, maybe someone would tell me like, yeah, that's like a deep rooted childhood thing. Like you're trying to make your parents happy or something, but like they are proud of me and like, I think it's just like I just wanted to be successful, right? I wanted a good foundation. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. Like a lot of it is financially. You want stability for your family and, yourself and, the comfort of living at home. And I hope the goal, right, is that, in due time, in your later part in life, you kind of relax from the early times that you gave up, right? Like in my later life, I love for my husband and I to take that time to travel the world, right? And do that. I didn't do it out of college like a lot of my friends and things did. I went straight to the hustle, but let's build this foundation and hopefully take that time on the back end.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, with where you are today though, and does it feel like, do you feel like you're working or do you go, oh my, like, I mean, I'm sure there's lots of days I go, holy shit. Like, I mean, we were getting ready for this podcast. I said to my producer, I'm like, we got to do something different because I'm working 80, 100 hours a week easy right now. I'm not burnt. So for me, I'm not burnt out. I love it. Where I struggle with it personally is doing the things that I don't want to do, like getting trapped into, it's like, why am I doing this? Like, but typically that's my problem as an operator. I haven't trained somebody to step into that position. I didn't prepare to see it, like, and went, oh man, where did this come from? Like I should have seen this and I didn't see it. And at the end of the day, if there's not somebody there to pick up these pieces, it was my lack of vision or awareness or action that didn't make a move to put something in place.
Listen, I think now more than ever, not to get too deep into my path, but when I was in that early period of career, I was in a toxic relationship. Think there was a little bit of a subconscious outlet of me turning more my focus to my work and that drive than kind of living in that toxicity. Now finding, cheesy and all, but the man of my dreams and the foundation I've always dreamt of and the kid at home and things like that. It's not that I have so much a problem with working. It's finding more time, like creating that boundary of saying, you know what, I'm shutting off now because I'm devoting, this time to my kid and my husband, whatever it might be. So it's pivoting kind of less hours. And sometimes you put the baby to bed and this and that, and you got to turn back on. Like that's still a thing. But I think it's realizing, instead of emptying the inbox, let's say, the 100 emails I used to do to perfection, it might not be perfection. There might be a few that are going to pivot into the next day because I made the decision to prioritize my family. So
this blends right into the conversation we were just having a few minutes ago, which is like, well, my friends were going out to the club and this and that. And then, it's, and this is what makes you human, right? Toxic relationship when you're young, which I do want to talk about, not about the relationship necessarily, but we can put his name and address and
sure.
On the
yeah.
I'm just kidding. But your ability to be able to create an amazing career, learn, grow, then, my team was doing their research on you and sent me like some details and all that stuff. Like your husband's a stud, right? Like it's amazing what you guys are doing. You have a, beautiful baby boy and you're putting time away. We talked about that in the past, like where you're disciplined, putting that time away for your family and your child. So like you're making the right choices. You're creating that future that you desire. And that came from somewhere. And so that's like, and for me, what I've kind of started to realize just by putting this all together is like these behaviors of relentlessness, the drive, the determination, the hustle, the willingness. It's like those overflow into areas where you put your focus and your energy. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, and whether the listener is hiring somebody who's young, training somebody who's young, who has young kids. We say all the time on this podcast, business is a series of relationships. And how you cultivate, create, and tend to those relationships ultimately determines, the success of your business, success of your personal life, your family life, your health oftentimes, because you have to have a relationship with yourself. Mm-hmm. And so like, both you and your husband work a lot, you're fit, you have a great child, like you're,
appreciate that. That's on the outside.
Yeah. But so to me, this is like, I think you've drawn so many like really core fundamentals into what you've done to create that.
Well, thank you. I think you're painting a pretty no, I know it sounds good. No, but I think it's true. I mean, I think you're very spot on that. Listen, I don't want to get deep in here in religion or things, but I just, I live,
you can get deep
no,
into
but I
you
live
want.
in like, just you relay positivity, you want positivity in your life, and kind of what you put out, you get back and you hope for that. So, again, like every day, if you just go into work and you're just like trying to give it your all and to your kid and to your husband, that's all you can do. I mean, what else can you ask of yourself? And we're probably not as good. And I don't mean this in any disrespect to men, but I think women probably have a lot more where they're not taking enough time to themselves, because we kind of have this default parent and the work thing and all this stuff. We're always kind of the micromanagers of it all. So then we put ourselves on the back burner. But, I talk to my other fellow moms and this and that. And, if you get onto Instagram and you see all the memes and you kind of, if you do it, Dwayne, be careful, because you're going to go down a rabbit hole of just like moms trying to juggle it all. But like, I respect and appreciate so many women, and I think who, and again, not to pivot, just kind of to focus on women, but there's a lot into it that I think, again, not to talk glass ceiling and this and that, but I wholeheartedly believe, maybe less now than when I was younger. I had to work double hard to get to where I'm today, because I was listen, I'm almost 40, I'm 38. But I'm blonde, blue-eyed. I mean, when I sat in the meetings with all the men in the room, in so many of these projects or events, you're not taken seriously until you get the buy-in of everyone. They're like, oh, okay, like after some time, because there's judgment.
Yeah, I think this is a really important topic. We try very, very hard to showcase as many women in business as we possibly can. It's difficult. Yeah. From the team's perspective, it's not easy to find there's more men, and that's okay. And there's reasons for that too. And I'd love to explore from your perspective, because I think it's important for people who own businesses to understand this piece. And it's important for young women who are trying to kind of sort their world out to hear the perspective of someone who has had to deal with it, overcome it, and isn't jaded or slighted and pissed off, angry or whatever, and have some story, because we can get so wrapped up in our stories, right? It's like we can be, even the most positive stories that we create in our lives, we can get wrapped up in them, and then they can later be, disempowering in our future. And so we have to always be careful about that stuff. But I'm very, very, it's one of the things that I wanted to talk about, because, you said earlier you were in a toxic relationship, which then pushed you into work. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that sounded what it was like.
Probably through speaking a little bit about, it's probably what pivoted me a little bit to just kind of get out of the house more than I realized, right? But subconsciously, just kind of happened.
And then, as a woman coming up in this industry, because it's hospitality is at the higher level pretty male dominated, isn't it? I think it's changed over the years, but
hospitality, I would say more probably a lot of the project management or construction elements that I would deal with, right? So even now, in my day-to-day job, I'm dealing with, I oversee a landscaping crews. I oversee tent building companies, right? Those are almost like your contractors, your construction workers, security details and things that's current, which is a little bit different, but kind of even back then when I was building out these events, and you're the leader telling all these different groups, genuinely men, right, what to do. They're looking at you, and then before you know it, you got your boots on and you're out there trudging along with them, and they're looking at you like, damn, what is she doing? And I remember those years of working, particularly in projects in, North Carolina, the guys were like, you're just like one of us. We're kind of scared of you, joking with me, but you just kind of get the respect and buy-in. And I don't really actually even think that's so, that it was even male buy-in or female buy-in or whatever. It was probably just at the time being young or youthful in maybe positions of having to delegate big projects or teams, right? Maybe the female thing is more resonated more currently in life, as you're sitting in mergers and acquisitions and stakeholders and people, and you're the only woman in the room of 20 different gentlemen, and they're kind of like, well, what does she do? And sometimes it's presumed you're the assistant, right? Are you the note taker? Can you get the coffee? And you're like,
Has that ever happened to you, by the way?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Really? You walk into a boardroom meeting and then they're like, oh yeah, I'll take a coffee with cream.
It has 100% happened. And I'm higher than that. I'm the people around me who know me, they kind of look at it, but it's there's just some people who have that mentality, and there's certain guys or what, it's not who works around me. If I lived in that environment around you, I'd say F this, but do I deal with people like that at times? Yeah. And so you realize that's just a mentality of their own, and I just take them in and for whatever it needs to be at the time and move on it. But it's kind of sad that it still exists. It
is. There's no question it is. But there's a lot of things in the world that still exist that are very sad. So it's I don't know. I think, that's a societal, conversation.
Yeah, we can have another few hours on that.
Yeah. But you have to evolve consciousness in order for that to change. And so you can either be pissed off about it or just kind of work in it, which it seems like you have.
But I'd say, thankfully, I've seen a change in that. Yeah. So I think for all the younger generation coming into this now, we, even as an organization or my colleagues' organization, people I talk to, there is much more women, opportunities for women in the organization for growth and success, even with, as you're suggesting, I mean, there's just some challenges with it, right? If you're going to have a kid, you have to have maternity leave. And that's just the reality where guys don't have to take, but ironically enough, a lot of organizations are doing the right thing and giving fathers the time off they need to support the wife and the kids and things of that sort. Not as often, but yeah, and that's probably just a natural, like, women who want to have families and have to be in these executive positions and take that time away from the company. But I think that when I haven't read or heard other podcasts or anything. Haven't taken the time on other women's successes in managing that. But in my own personal case, it was basically just creating a plan for the team that was as dummy proof as I can, that it was basically like, I'm here with you in spirit. And, I trained some people. And then, you sit on the other end while you're away and they're like, do they need me anymore? Right? Because you did it so right. And then you just have to have that level of confidence when you get back and realize they're like, wow, we missed you, but it flowed and it happened and everything, achieved. But, you're just going to have that.
One of the things I'm curious is, like, as you were coming up and developing yourself as a female business leader, you seem to have been able to maintain your feminine energy. And I don't mean blonde hair, blue eyes, feminine. I mean, there's masculine energy and there's feminine energy. And I've worked with men who have lots of feminine energy, and I've worked with men who have had masculine energy, and vice versa with women. In that, and then I feel like, and there's lots of studies that say the feminine energy is actually the most powerful energy. Especially when it shows up from a feminine woman. But you seem to have, you don't seem like you're a bulldog. I'm sure you have that in you, but you don't come off that way. Like, you're very feminine, and so I'm curious, was there consciousness in that, or was it just you held your own space, or especially as you were coming up, like, how'd you form yourself as a female leader in relatively male-dominated?
Yeah, I think that's a choice. Like, literally, I can't recall the day or the year or the time, but like, as kind of my career was growing, there was almost this feeling of choice of what kind of leader do I want to be. And I remember thinking, like, so many women are, and I'm just going to say it, like, choose to be bitchy. And like, they instill fear amongst their teams, and they're kind of like, and to me, that comes back to that kind of energy that you wake up and you live with every day. Kind of like, it's like, that's just not the feeling I want to have, or I want for people to think of me. But it was like, this thing was, I remember so vividly thinking, like, do I need to be bitchy to be successful? Like, does that even make sense? Like, like, do I have to be tough and bulldog and, kind of put up that cold wall so I'm not approachable and this and that and the other? And then I realized, like, that's not the style I'm going to take. And it probably has a lot to do with, again, like, a great colleague of mine who has has the opposite of that energy as well, male, but just very warm and welcoming and well respected in the business, and people think of him, and he's kind of like, again, mentors that just subconsciously are there. And I'm like, that guy is so well respected and so successful and done well. He didn't have that. Again, you've seen a lot of men who have the bulldog, and I was like, as a woman, I'm not going to pivot to that. I'm just going to be me. And I find you get more with sugar than salt, personally. In my career, I have found that, if you make whatever team you're working with more of a foe, like a friend of yours and a teammate of yours, than kind of them looking at you, like, you try not to look down on people, and you kind of make them more amongst you. I mean, hey, they call me I'm more or less like the mother of the company. And that was before I even had kids, but like, I'm the open door policy, and whether people come in to tell me I'm a bit of a psychiatrist more than I realized, because I think it just, maybe you're saying it, maybe I have it more naturally where people are like, Vaneli, we want to talk to you.
Yeah. So actually, I think the phrase actually in your company is she's the company counselor.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think that
sounds about right.
Yeah.
It does. It does. I don't know. Maybe I can get a promotion. I don't get paid for that part, but it weighs on you. I'll tell you, at times you're like, man, like I'm offloaded, right? Like everyone's offloading that to you, but it's part of the job.
Like I would like to come back to that, but I want to go back to you, that point in time where you made a decision, like what leader do I want to be? Yeah. And then one of the questions you asked yourself to how did you figure that out? Like what were from your recollection, like what process did you go? Because I think this man or woman, I think we all struggle with like, holy shit, what leader do I want to be? Like, so I'm curious what process you used to kind of flush that out. And then what were some of the struggles as you kind of moved towards it?
Right. To answer your question, I think a lot of maybe my decision making was based on experience of leaders, right? Like working for different styles of leaders and learning who do you respect and who do you appreciate working for and doing that work for, if I'm being clear on that. So, just by experience, realizing personally that for me, I find so much more respect if someone is treating you with respect, for lack of better words. So, but there is the firm but fair, right? So there is that balance somewhere in there where I think from a highest point of leadership, there has to be a bit of fear. I don't want to use the word fear, but you have to have a bit of that. There's accountability, right? So if as a leader, your team is not doing something, it can't always be like, hey, that's okay. Right? Like, it's cool. You got to know that there's repercussions to that, which does come with uncomfortable conversations or tough conversations. So it can't always be warm and fluffy all the time. It's just what the general takeaway will be. So, and I think different industries, Dwayne, honestly, I can't speak to the other, colleagues and people you've had, but maybe in some industries, certain styles of leadership are just more fitting, right? Like the bulldog approach, I'm presuming here, maybe like your Wall Streets or your things are just what has to happen because it's just kind of stylistically more that. Maybe not. Maybe I'm completely wrong. But again, in my path, I think, the hospitality, the customer service, you're dealing with seasonal employees. You got to get buy-in. You got to get a lot of groups moving quickly and together. You got to get them more on your team than have them fight you on it, if that makes sense, Yeah,
I mean, I always say, like, if your people aren't with you on planning the battle, they're going to spend all their time battling the plan.
It sounded great. Perfect. I'm going to write that one down. Yeah. That's a good one.
I must have said it right. So you spoke, the bumper sticker I put on what you said earlier about like looking at other leaders was role models. You were role modeling. Were most of your role models women, men? What did you choose?
I would say they are men. I haven't had the opportunity really to work alongside or for a woman, but very different styles of leadership. And I think if you just take a little bit and piece from a few of them that I've had so far, their personalities couldn't be more different. And you just take away, personally, I think it's just natural. Like I can't say that I've sat there and been like, oh, I want to take this from this leader and this from this leader, and that it's just kind of like naturally kind of taking the best of that and learning it and trying to model it into your own.
Yeah, well, like what I love about that especially for the listeners, and for myself, like when I say listeners, I include myself. But is, there are always, I had a general manager that worked for me in our restaurant industry, and she always said, like, I have two eyes looking at everything else, and there's like, a pair of 40 eyes looking back at me. Mm-hmm. And so, people are seeing what you're doing. And so you role modeled, not necessarily by like any strategy specifically, like outwardly, but you saw what you liked. Right. You recognized a style or a perspective or process or whatever, and you started to make it your own. That's what I heard.
Yeah. I think that more natural than something that was just so, happens of significance, and I'm like, oh yeah, like let's take that in. And you've read I've read the books, and again now I can't think of plenty. I can try to think of some that were impactful. That whether you took a piece from a book here and there, like I think it's still important to read the self-help books or read the leadership books or read, it's a dying thing. Maybe you're listening to them more days now than when I was reading them. But if you take a little bit from all of that, as well as who you're observing around you or you're working with, I think it helps mold you. I think everything, kind of like you're saying, like I've been molded to who I am just by experience.
I mean, I think that's the way of the world. I'm curious, since we're talking about role modeling and stuff, what is your take on networking?
Networking. The short answer is I cringe lately because the short answer now in my life is I cringe lately because at times I find they're very fake, if I have to be honest, because they have been people are not putting those together with purpose correctly. Does that make sense? There's like, oh, we're just going to do this networking event for X group, right? And then like everyone just gets in a room and they're like, I don't know, like it's just awkward. Like it's just an awkward setting. And again, coming full circle, it's like when I have the time that I want to take the time for, I don't want to be put in this weird room without purpose. But if done in a correct way, right? Like you're telling me, Vaneli, like, I want to put all of these people together in a space where we're, aiming, we have these goals or this vision or, these commonalities or this is the thing, around it. If purposely done, I'm all for it, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yep. Well, then from a networking standpoint, when you started your career, how did that help influence you also?
I get what you're saying. Like, the trigger was like you're telling me networking events because they get put on my table all the time. But I hear you.
100%. But that's why, because we all have to spend our time in certain ways. And so the business owners that are listening to that previous comment about your take on networking, it's like, you got to make sure you invest your time wisely and your money wisely. If you're holding a networking event, it needs to be purposeful.
I mean, that's my story. But if you're networking for your business, right? Like, again, like it kills me. Again, I'm just going to give an example. Like we're hospitality. It's a little bit different, but should I be like a landscape owner perhaps in a room of businesses and things like that, I'll just see them walk around and they're not uncomfortable. Like you if you're going to take advantage of the situation, like jump in there, you know what I mean? Like go in with like the creative card, or it just needs to be purposeful, like you gotta go in and know what you're trying to get out of it and walk away with a success from it. But coming back to your question of networking in early career it's critical. I mean, my husband too, he's in kind of a 1% world of very affluent, successful business owners and run large organizations. And it inspires you to kind of be around people who have achieved a lot and to be able to call on them and get advice or get connected to someone else or, what have you. I think is extremely important.
Hey, everybody. Thanks very much for listening to that conversation with Vaneli Martinov. She is a firecracker when it comes to operations. As I said in the podcast, I've seen her in action, and it's beyond impressive. But please tune in next week for the second portion of our conversation, where she discusses, her process of who she had to create herself to be in order to arrive at the leader that she wanted to be, which is an interesting process to listen to her and how she did it. And of course, these guys hire 1,000 people every season. And so she goes through kind of their practices of hiring and recruiting. And anyways, it's a great conversation. In the end, we talk about fear and courage, and it's really an impressive conversation. So tune in next week, please. Thank you very much for tuning in to this week, and please again keep sharing, liking, and subscribing to all of our channels. It helps us keep some advertising off the air. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you being with us. If you found value in the show and know a friend or coworker who could benefit from this conversation, please share the link via text or on social media. Remember, each share creates a ripple effect of knowledge and inspiration, and if this podcast has supported you in any way, please support us by clicking the follow or subscribe button. It helps us to improve the delivery of top quality content moving forward.
The views, information, or opinions expressed by guests during the Dwayne Kerrigan podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Dwayne Kerrigan and his affiliates. Dwayne Kerrigan or the Dwayne Kerrigan podcast is not responsible for and does not verify the accuracy of any of the information contained in the podcast series. The primary purpose of this podcast is to educate and inform. Listeners are advised to consult with a qualified professional or specialist before making any decisions based on the content of this podcast.